Hi guys, welcome back to Gryphon Studio. I hope you're all doing okay. So if you do cast your minds back to an earlier video that I produced, a few earlier videos actually that I produced, where I made a few interesting centerpiece style scatter terrain bits for encounters, just to kind of spice them up a little bit and create some really interesting, mysterious intrigue for players. So today we're going to do a few more and hopefully get some of these ideas out of my head. Remember, if you do enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and feel free to subscribe. And you know what, check out my Patreon page as well if you feel like doing that, and you can support the channel with just a $1 or €1 or £1 or whatever you want to support with if you feel like it. If not, that's cool. Enjoy the video. Alright, so I started out with a few XPS circles, and these were cut out on my homemade jig on the Proxon, and then I took a aluminium ball to texture them. I found this old child ball and I just cut it in half and tidied up the edges with some scissors, a knife and a large file, and then just filled it up with a bit of ballast using some acrylic glue. I think this glue is meant for nail art or something, but I found it in a pound shop and it was really quite useful. So here a little bit of very, very coarse grit goes in the bottom, and it acts like a sort of coal, also gives a bit of weight to the piece. And once that's all in there, you can just feel free to secure that with a little bit of watered down PVA just to fix it in place. And then I built up the plinth with the XPS foam circles from earlier. And for a bit of added mystery and intrigue, I thought it would be a really cool design feature to have some skulls in this kind of brazier. And I really wanted the top layer of this whole thing to be almost entirely skulls. So I just super glued these down, and of course if you wanted to you could add a bit of a layer over the top of some super glue thin or something just to really fix them in place. And then I gave the entire thing a quick undercoat with a black spray primer, and I added the cog here to the top of the plinth to add as a bit of extra support and a bit of extra detail for the underneath of the brazier bowl. The paint job for pretty much all these pieces is more or less the same, especially when it comes to the stone, so I'm going to start with a quick overbrush of a medium grey. I thought the brazier itself could be a kind of a bronze colour. And I did my best to create a kind of flame looking thing with some hot glue, just kind of holding the brazier upside down and then kind of sticking the glue to it and dragging it away so that it would create these sort of tall spires of glue. And then I painted that all white and hit it with a few different shades of blue, hopefully creating a kind of strange gas-like flame. And then I covered the whole thing in the black-brown wash, as I would do with any of my other dungeon terrain. Obviously taking care not to get any of the wash on the fire or on the skulls on the inside, as I wanted those to have a nice blue, vibrant glow. And I always like adding moss to various projects, especially dungeon projects, because it helps hide a few of the imperfections in the form and generally my mistakes, and also helps to really cement the item into its environment. Right, now I have a whole bunch of craft beads in my craft bead drawer here, and I took a cocktail stick and I decided to see what I could make just using these craft beads. And the idea was just to create this interesting ornate design that might be something interesting in a game. And what I came up with was this kind of magical pylon or a locus or something that would attract magic or maybe do something in game. If you've got any of those homebrew games that you want to spicing up a little bit, then you can obviously create these interesting designs just using some simple craft beads on a cocktail stick. Just use super glue to hold them all in place, and I left the end of the cocktail stick a little bit long so that it could be placed into a foam plinth. There is a small hole on the very top bead there, which I can just cover up with a little bit of green stuff or modelling putty. And I used a bit of hot glue to secure these foam pieces together to create a small plinth. I used a cocktail stick as well just to make sure that they're lined up with the ones underneath. And then I used another dollop of hot glue to secure the Magic Pylon to the base. Now in a bit I want to give this thing a black primer spray undercoat, but I'm going to need to protect the foam first, so I'm using some Mod Podge and black paint to do that. And then I sprayed the whole thing with the black primer and then went over everything with the medium grey for the stonework. Nice heavy dry brush again, or an overbrush even. Now all these beads started off silver and gold, so I'm going to repaint them silver and gold, but in the order that I want them to be silver and gold. So here I'm just taking some Retributor armour from Citadel range and some Runefang steel. And although I forgot to film it, I then painted the ball on top a deep blue and then kind of frosted it up with some white. Okay, so now for the monolith. I cut a piece of XPS foam into this kind of tapered cube sort of design and drew on some satanic symbols of sorts, etched them in with an X-Acto knife and then deepened those cuts with a beveling tool. And I wanted this thing to look really old, so I put on some cracks as well and deepened those cracks with a cocktail stick. And I also textured the whole thing to be like an old stony texture, using an aluminium ball. And I'm going to use a few square pieces for this one, just because the pillar is square, so I've decided that the plinth would be a mixture of circle and squares. And just by using some different sizes of XPS foam, different widths, different lengths, different depths, you can really create some interesting textures in designs in the way that you want these monoliths to look. And in the end it really helps the look, you know, and it lends to the notion that these things were created and built and erected instead of just, you know, cut out of foam on a desk in someone's house. And this gets the usual treatment of the black paint and Mod Podge. Any super glue or spray primer any of this thing would ordinarily absolutely wreck it, so with the super glue going on later I thought it'd be best to protect it. It then gets a nice heavy overbrushing of a medium grey. And yep, you guessed it, when that's dry it gets a full treatment of black-brown wash. And then using a little bit of super glue, I glued down some candles that I'd made from a previous video. Like so. And I also painted them a nice candle-y colour. Then I added loads of moss to this thing. I want this thing to look super old, like it'd been there for centuries, and was really overgrown and very weathered. These are the two products I use for all of my moss over all of my projects. Just mix them with a bit of PVA glue and then smear them on. Okay, so for this last piece, this is going to be a kind of weird creature coming out of some sort of mysterious well of weird fluid. So I'm going to build up the sides here with a little bit of foam. So it's the usual circle with a circle cut out of a different colour there, XPS foam there you can see. I'm going to etch in a few little bit of brick patterns here and make them slightly deeper with a beveling tool. And then give it that super sweet aluminium ball texture. The pretty standard black paint Mod Podge undercoat for everything. So for the tentacles, I had the idea of using a piece of paperclip through the middle of some clay that would hopefully help keep the clay strong and sturdy, stop it from cracking and breaking in future. But this seemed almost kind of impossible, like I just wasn't getting a good texture with it, and it never felt like the clay really clung to the paperclip. So instead I opted to just lose the paperclip and make the entire thing out of clay, rolling it on my non-stick mat here into a kind of tapered sausage shape. Made it a little bit shorter because it was too long. This is the first time I've ever really used clay, so I just flattened the bottom there and then bent it into a kind of natural organic tentacle like shape. Then after doing a whole bunch of those, I got a little bit more clay and I stuck that across one side of the tentacle. Now this piece of clay I'm going to etch in a design for the suckers that go on octopus tentacles or squid tentacles. I'm using a piece of a paintbrush bristle protector. I'm just going to stamp in some little circles into the soft new clay on the side. And then using a silicone sculpting tool, I'm just going to poke a little hole in the middle of each of those rings, creating these interesting sucker patterns. Do that along the whole thing and over all of the tentacles, and I had myself the makings of a monster. And then just smoothed out some of the edges with the silicone tool. I then flattened the bottom of some of these tentacles to help the surface area so they would stick to the base. Just used a knife to do that. And then I super glued them down. And that should just about do it. The stone ring gets the typical heavy overbrush of medium grey paint. Now when it comes to weird monster squid octopus tentacles, then you can pretty much choose any colours you want. I'm going to go with a kind of a cold colour, so I'm going to go with purple and then this sort of deep sea turquoise type colour, and hopefully those can be then highlighted with a little bit of maybe a lighter purple like a lilac and a pink, and then the underside can be highlighted with more of a pale blue or a pale sea blue. I want a little bit of a water effect in this, so I'm going to use some of the CFS water clear 2-part epoxy, which is mixed in equal parts by volume, and then you mix it together and you pour it with a bit of a tint to it. I've put some black acrylic paint in this, and hopefully that should help give it this kind of black oozy tar type look. Unfortunately it did not, so I had to add another layer of gloss Mod Podge over the top just to really sell that kind of shiny surface that I think it should have. Alright guys, so there we are, all finished. I really quite enjoyed making these. It took a little bit longer than I thought maybe they would do, but there's a few curing times for various things like Mod Podge paints and water effects and things like that. But otherwise they were pretty simple to make. It's the first time I've really worked with clay, and it was okay. I think I could get better given some more practice, but I did an okay job, I think. So yeah, feel free to give me a thumbs up and throw a comment at me or something, and hopefully, and maybe subscribe, and then hopefully I can get some more videos back to you soon. I do try to reply to everyone that comments, but I also have a Patreon page and also an Instagram page. Feel free to check me out on both of those if you do want to support the channel financially with $1 or £1 or €1 or something like that. Feel free to do that. I very much appreciate it. I thank all of my patrons so much because they donate in their hard-earned cash, you know, to some YouTube guy, and you know, these are the best kind of people. So thank you very much to all of my patrons. That's it for this one though. I'll see you again next time. Thanks for stopping by, and happy crafting.